Just a few days before Christmas in 2022, a large United Airlines aircraft, a Boeing 777, began plunging straight toward the ocean just seconds after taking off from Hawaii. Alarms were blaring in the cockpit, but the pilots couldn't understand what was happening. Everything was unfolding rapidly, and only seconds were left. Would the pilots be able to save the plane in time? Or were the lives of 271 people now in danger? This is the suspense-filled true story of United Airlines Flight 1722. On the afternoon of December 18, 2022, United Airlines Flight 722 was about to depart from Kahului Airport in Maui, Hawaii, for San Francisco. There were a total of 271 passengers and 10 crew members on board. From the outside, it looked like a routine flight. But in reality, there had already been multiple warnings hinting that this journey would be different. Just before the flight, the captain received a strict weather warning from United Airlines dispatcher. That day, Hawaii was experiencing severe storm conditions, strong winds, lightning, and heavy rain. While the first officer was inspecting the aircraft outside, he received a message from a friend telling him that Hawaiian Airlines Flight 35 had encountered dangerous turbulence that very morning. When it landed, 20 people had been injured and 11 were hospitalized in serious condition. These incidents made it clear that the pilots of United Flight 722 were already aware that today's flight wouldn't be easy. As soon as the captain and first officer boarded the aircraft, they immediately instructed the flight attendants to ensure that no passenger stood up during takeoff. This was crucial for safety, given the stormy weather, where even a small mistake could have serious consequences. That's why the flight was handed over to a very experienced captain. At 55 years old, he had over 20,000 flight hours under his belt. Previously, he flew Airbus aircraft. He had only recently transitioned to flying Boeings, and that detail would soon become critically important. The first officer, on the other hand, had worked with Hawaiian Airlines before and understood Hawaii's unpredictable weather. He had a total of 5,300 flight hours, but only 120 of them were on the Boeing 777. That meant he was still relatively new to both the aircraft and United Airlines. On this flight, his role was that of the pilot monitoring, assisting the captain and keeping an eye on everything. Around 2:30 p.m., Flight 1722 pushed back from the gate at Maui Airport and began taxiing to the runway. The 271 passengers were comfortably seated, expecting a smooth 5-hour journey. People trusted United Airlines and the Boeing 777. But no one knew that within minutes, this flight would turn into one of the most terrifying experiences of their lives. It had started raining heavily outside, but the pilots weren't too concerned about the rain itself. Their main worry was wind shear, a sudden change in wind speed or direction. Many air accidents around the world have occurred because of this. They feared that as soon as the plane lifted off, they might need to perform a wind shear escape maneuver. Just before takeoff, they made two key decisions. First, they set the plane's flaps at 20 degrees instead of the usual 15 degrees, which would help keep the plane more stable at lower speeds, important during turbulent weather. Second, the captain set the engines to full power. Usually, power is kept slightly below maximum during takeoff to reduce engine stress, but in today's conditions, every bit of power counted. These two decisions, more flap and full engine power, would later prove crucial to the story. As soon as ATC gave takeoff clearance, the captain pushed the engines to full thrust. The plane sped down the runway and in seconds reached 260 kilometers per hour. In one swift motion, it lifted off into the sky, slicing through dark storm clouds. The initial few seconds were smooth. But then came the first danger. The airspeed began fluctuating wildly, signaling extreme turbulence. A moment's delay could have destabilized the aircraft. But the captain was ready. He was prepared to activate the wind shear maneuver if needed. The first officer was also fully alert. Even though he wasn't flying the plane, monitoring the systems, instruments, and radio was equally critical after takeoff, and he was doing his job well. The aircraft was now airborne. But now came the first officer's key tasks: communicating with air traffic control and switching the aircraft from takeoff mode to normal flight mode. Sounds simple, but it wasn't. The flaps were still set at a higher degree. and the engines were at full thrust. Plus, both pilots were on high alert for wind shear. As the plane reached 1,000 feet, the captain lowered the nose slightly to increase airspeed. But this introduced a new risk. If speed increased while the flaps remained extended, the strong airflow could damage them, very dangerous. The captain instructed, retract the flaps. He meant to reduce them to 5 degrees from 20 degrees. But the first officer heard 15 degrees and adjusted them accordingly, leaving them at 15 degrees and moving on to other tasks. This small miscommunication might seem minor, but in flight, such an error can lead to disaster. Initially, everything seemed fine. The captain believed the flaps had been retracted properly. But in reality, they hadn't. This small misunderstanding would now endanger all 281 people on board. The plane's speed kept increasing. The captain reduced power slightly, but the speed didn't drop. Meanwhile, the first officer was busy with ATC, as they were cleared to climb to 16,000 feet. The captain was now confused. He thought the flaps had been retracted, but when he looked closely, he realized they were still extended. He immediately told the first officer to fix them, which he did, but it was already too late. The aircraft had reached altitude, surrounded by dense clouds, no ground below, no sky above. Suddenly, a dangerous warning appeared on the flight display. The plane's nose was dipping downward. Moments later, the Boeing 777 began descending from the sky. The root of the problem: the captain was previously an Airbus pilot, and had only recently switched to flying Boeings. While both aircraft are modern and large, their controls are very different. In an Airbus, if you leave the controls at a certain angle, the plane maintains that position like a car's steering wheel locking. In a Boeing, however, letting go of the controls means the plane slowly begins pitching up or down. Because of muscle memory from the Airbus, the captain unknowingly loosened controls slightly. His attention was focused on the flaps and airspeed, and he assumed the plane would stabilize on its own, just like in an Airbus. But it didn't. The nose began dipping downward gradually, and the pilots didn't even realize it. The first officer sensed something was off. He saw the plane descending but was confused. Why was the captain doing this? For a moment, he thought his instruments were faulty. The captain, meanwhile, was preoccupied with flap and speed warnings. Meanwhile, the plane continued descending through the clouds. No one had any idea how dangerous the situation had become. The aircraft was now in a steep dive, and speed was uncontrollably high. In a panic, the captain told the first officer to reduce flaps to just 1 degree, but he himself didn't realize that he was actually pushing the nose down further. The first officer did as instructed, but the plane's speed kept increasing. Now, the overspeed alarm began sounding continuously. The first officer was completely confused. Was the captain doing this on purpose? Was the storm interfering? Or had their instruments failed? So many questions and no answers. He quickly looked at the captain's display and saw the same danger signs. The plane was now falling at a rate of 8,000 feet per minute. A few more seconds, and it would hit the ocean. Inside the cabin, passengers were still calm. No one realized their lives were hanging by a thread. There was no more room for doubt. The plane was plunging toward the ocean at 550 kilometers per hour. Suddenly, the first officer's eyes widened in fear. He shouted, "Pull up! Pull the plane up!" The captain didn't have a second to think. He yanked the controls back with full force and reduced engine power. Maybe this last-ditch effort could save them, and then, in a sudden jolt, the plane's nose turned upward. The entire aircraft shook violently. Passengers were pinned to their seats as if on a reverse roller coaster. The jolt was so intense that no one even had a chance to react. The aircraft was now only 750 feet above the ocean. At that moment, the plane's system began blaring a loud alarm. A terrain warning, meaning the aircraft could still crash into the ocean. Both pilots were silent. Their breath held, eyes fixed on the screens, and then, instead of descending further, the plane began to climb. Flight 172, which was just moments away from plunging into the sea, was now miraculously saved. The aircraft began climbing so rapidly that passengers felt pinned to their seats. The engine's roar became deafening and terrifying. Within seconds, the plane was ascending at a speed of 8,000 feet per minute. From the outside, everything may have looked normal, but the real fear was inside the cockpit. Very soon, the aircraft had put significant distance between itself and the ocean. That's when the captain slowly reduced engine power and brought the plane back to a level and safe flight. The two pilots may have appeared calm, but deep down, they were shaken. Only they knew how close they had come to disaster. The flight attendants sensed something was wrong too, but even they didn't realize how serious the situation had been. The captain immediately spoke to the lead flight attendant and asked whether anyone was injured or if the plane had sustained any damage. Once it was confirmed that everything was fine, it was decided that the flight would continue to San Francisco. Finally, after around 4.5 hours, the plane landed safely there. United Airlines was informed of the incident, but they did not report it to America's safety agency, the NTSB, because, according to regulations, reporting is only mandatory when someone is injured or the aircraft is damaged, and neither had occurred. This matter only came to light nearly 2 months later when someone checked the flight data on the Flight Radar 24 website. They noticed something odd, and then a website called the Air Current published a report on it. Had that not happened, we might never have known how close the plane came to disaster that day. Later, both pilots were retrained to ensure such a mistake wouldn't happen again. This whole incident teaches us how a small mistake, a bit of negligence, and challenging weather can come together to create a major threat. If this story shocked you, be sure to watch the next video, in which we will tell you another interesting story with you. Like our effort and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.